Hi, I'm Andy Mioch and you are watching AnewZ. Here are the headlines. Donald Trump weighs U.S. involvement in the Israeli-Iranian conflict. Canada announces a new package of sanctions against Russia as the G7 summit wraps up. Flags at half-staff as Ukrainians mourn 28 killed in Russian aerial attack on Kyiv. Thank you for tuning in. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said the nation would never surrender as demanded by US President Donald Trump and warned the United States it would face irreparable damage if it intervenes. In a statement, Khamenei said that peace or war could not be imposed on the Islamic Republic, adding that any US military intervention will be accompanied by irreparable damage. His remarks come as the White House is considering options that include joining Israel in attacking Iranian nuclear sites. Earlier, as the conflict entered its sixth day, Khamenei said on social media that Iran will show Israel no mercy. Donald Trump answered Khamenei's message, wishing him good luck. When asked by reporters on the U.S. joining Israeli strikes in Iran, he said that he may do it and that he may not do it. This comes following talks Trump held with the National Security Council on the situation in the Middle East.
U.S. President Donald Trump gathered his national security team at the White House on Tuesday for an emergency meeting. According to CBS News, the main topic was whether the U.S. should support Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. The White House has not confirmed what was discussed. One possible target, the network says, is Fordo, a heavily fortified uranium enrichment site in Iran. CBS also reports that Trump's advisors remain divided on whether to take direct military action. A White House official said Trump spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by phone on Tuesday. What they discussed hasn't been made public. Donald Trump also posted a warning in social media that the US knows where Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is hiding, calling him an easy target, though saying there are no plans for now to act. He called for the country's unconditional surrender. The conflict has entered its sixth day. Israeli military authorities say more missiles were launched from Iran early Wednesday morning local time. The IDF also reported has struck uranium centrifuge production sites and weapons factories in Iran overnight. Iran reports 224 deaths, while Israel says 24 people have died on its side. In both countries, evacuations of residents from their homes are underway. Meanwhile, the US is stepping up its military presence in the Middle East. Reuters reports that more fighter jets and warships are being deployed, with officials calling it a defensive move to protect American forces and intercept incoming missiles.
For more on the latest remarks by the US President on the Iranian-Israeli conflict and the general mood in the country on possibly joining Israeli strikes, we go to Washington and our Ubay Shabander. Hi Ubay, we've heard Trump saying a little while ago that nobody knows what he's gonna do. Now, he also said he's had it with Iran and again called for their unconditional surrender. Is the US warming up to the idea of joining Israel's campaign?
I was once the hunted, I am now the hunter. Those words by President Trump certainly suggest that he may be leaning towards supporting offensive military operations against Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles program. No decision has been made by the president just yet, but clearly speaking to reporters earlier, the president indicated that he was frustrated with Iran's response to multiple outreach attempts by the Americans to get the Iranians to negotiate a deal. Of course, that 60-day deadline expired and Israel launched its aerial attacks and special intelligence operations that seem to have caught the Iranians by surprise. Now, the whole world is waiting to see what will President Trump decide. Will he lend the full military might of the U.S. Air Force, which includes long-range B-2 stealth bombers capable of carrying bombs upwards of 14,000 kilograms that can penetrate deep into the Iranian mountains where that nuclear strategic facility Fordow is buried underground. Will the Americans continue to provide defensive support in the form of anti-air, anti-missile defense capabilities to support Israel in its attempt to shoot down those Iranian ballistic missiles that continue to be launched against the Israelis as this war continues? But this is the strategic ambiguity that is part of President Trump's strategy and his approach to diplomacy. He likes to keep others off guard and not to signal what his next steps would be. But it certainly is significant that hearing from President Trump as he spoke to reporters earlier in the day, that he seemed to suggest that all options for negotiations with the Iranians may have been exhausted. In fact, when he was asked by one reporter what message President Trump was sending to Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, he said, "I encourage him to continue the fight." So it seems here that perhaps the President of the United States is leaning more and more as this war continues each passing day to support the Israeli operations from an offensive perspective. Of course, the Israelis have destroyed a number of Iranian nuclear facilities in Natanz and in Isfahan, but that site of Fordow, which holds Iran's most advanced centrifuges that can be used to enrich uranium to weapons grade levels, that is much more difficult to reach. And there are new reports that the Israelis may be running low on those Arrow 2 interceptor missiles used to intercept Iranian medium-range and long-range ballistic missiles. So there may be perhaps more impetus for the Americans to get involved and to end this war. And of course, we're seeing reports here in Washington that the Israeli government is pressing President Trump to join the ongoing war against the Iranians. The Israelis saying that it is necessary to destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program, which would be a threat not only to Israel in the region, but also to the United States. President Trump signaling that he is frustrated with Iran and telling the reporters that Iran over the years has called for death to America. And now perhaps the bully, as President Trump put it, is now getting a taste of their own medicine. So certainly all indicators here that President Trump does support Prime Minister Netanyahu's ongoing operations, but he is keeping everyone guessing on whether President Trump will take that next step to support the bombing efforts that could potentially destroy Iran's most advanced nuclear facility in Fordow.
Well, as everyone awaits the decision, are there any concerns being voiced in the U.S. that military involvement might provoke the Iranians to hit U.S. bases and personnel across the Middle East?
Well, you have U.S. military bases and diplomatic facilities across the Middle East and in the Arabian Gulf, well within range of Iranian missile strikes, as well as Iranian militia proxy groups that operate from Iraq to Lebanon and throughout the region. So there certainly is concern in the U.S. Central Command, also known as CENTCOM, which is headquartered in Doha, that Iran may activate its regional terror network, as well as use kamikaze drone strikes against American strategic facilities. So far, we have seen the Iranians not attack any American assets or interests in the region. President Trump had earlier sent a warning to the Iranians that if any American civilians or military or diplomatic personnel are killed, that there will be severe repercussions. Notably, we've also seen some of Iran's allies in the region, such as the Houthi militants in Yemen. They have also held off on attacking American naval assets in the Red Sea. So certainly there may be indicators here that Iran is concerned about American military retaliation if they do choose to launch strikes against American military bases in the Arabian Gulf and the wider region. We have seen reports that the U.S. has begun calling for Americans in Israel to evacuate, and that the American embassy in Jerusalem will also be closing down safety precautions for the next few days. But there is certainly a concern in Washington that the Iranians may launch attacks against American military bases. Of course, President Trump in 2019 had launched a retaliatory attack against Iran's most highest-ranking general, the Quds Force commander, Qasem Soleimani, after American military personnel were attacked by Iranian proxies. So thus far, Tehran is holding off, but this war could certainly escalate to new levels if the U.S. military, including F-35 jets and B-2 bombers, join Israel's ongoing strikes against Iran's missile and nuclear facilities. So U.S. Central Command on high alert.
Ubay, thank you so much. Now, Iran has defended its missile and drone attacks against Israel at the UN as an act of self-defense. Tehran announced for the first time that it used Fatah-1 hypersonic missiles against Israel and condemned the US-backed assaults targeting Iran. Artura Shiralilu has the details.
Iran's representative to the United Nations, AnewZ Iravani, said that Tehran's firing of ballistic missiles and drones against Israel is a legitimate act of self-defense, according to the UN Charter, and that it has been limited, deterrent, and in proportion to the Israeli aggression. Addressing a UN Security Council meeting in New York, he also condemned the support of Israel's invasion of Iran by the US and other Western countries, saying Israel had Washington's green light to attack Iran. In Tehran, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, in a message on his X account, said Israel's attacks were designed to prevent Iran and the US from reaching a nuclear deal. He said Iran has not left the negotiating table, but added it was meaningless to continue the talks while Israel is using the US-made arms to kill Iranian generals, scientists, and civilians. Meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps said on Wednesday that for the first time, it fired Fatah-1 hypersonic missiles at Israel in an apparent military shift on its sixth day of responding to Israel's attacks by firing ballistic missiles on kamikaze UAVs. The move came one day after the Chief of the Staff of Armed Forces, Major General Abdurrahim Mousavi, said Iran will depart from deterrent to retaliatory attacks. He warned the residents of Tel Aviv and Haifa to leave the cities after Israel's continuous attacks on the Iranian military and nuclear sites, as well as civilians. Artura Shiralilu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
The already 6-day-old conflict shows no signs of slowing. While Tel Aviv faced another barrage of missiles overnight, Israeli airstrikes also hit deep inside Tehran. For more, we go to Tel Aviv and our Trent Murray.
Well, day 6 of this war now, and we are continuing to see Iran and Israel exchange fire. Here in Tel Aviv, we certainly saw it overnight with around 30 ballistic missiles being fired towards the city. The IDF is saying that most of them were intercepted. The ambulance service here is saying it didn't receive any reports of casualties or injuries as people took to their nearest bomb shelters. But in Tehran, we have also seen heavy bombing. The IDF admitting that 50 fighter aircraft were in the skies of the Iranian capital, bombing key Iranian research facilities as part of its nuclear program, military bases, and even a university that the Israelis claim was linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. But of course, while this exchange of blows and fire takes place, the international community does remain increasingly concerned about this region being dragged into a wider war. Israel is continuing to garner support from a number of Western countries. We, of course, saw that statement from G7 leaders in Canada where they said that Israel had a right to defend itself, and they also agreed that Iran should never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That statement also, interestingly, saying that Iran was the principal source of regional instability and terror. It is a different view, though, if you look at some of the major heavyweights in this region. Saudi Arabia, one of the first countries to condemn its condemnation and denunciation of blatant Israeli aggression. Very similar messages we're hearing from other heavyweights, including Turkey, Egypt, the UAE and Jordan. But despite those messages, it doesn't appear that either side right now are willing to back down. The rhetoric from the Israelis is that they are going to continue their military operation. Of course, while much of this region also anticipates possible US involvement, but perhaps in a sign that the Israelis are feeling even more emboldened and confident. We've seen in the past few hours them downgrade the level of emergency status here in Israel. They have loosened restrictions on citizens. Gatherings of up to 30 people are once again allowed. Workplaces are going to reopen. Schools will remain closed, but it's the first time Israel's Home Command has changed the advice since this major war began on Friday. Israeli military analysts are saying they believe that Iran's ability to attack Israel has become significantly weakened. Trent Murray for AnewZ, Tel Aviv.
Now over to Ukraine, where Russia has carried out its deadliest attack on Kyiv in months on Tuesday, leaving at least 28 dead and hundreds injured. Rescue crews continued searching the rubble as residents brought flowers to honor the victims.
Flags fly at half-mast across Kyiv on Wednesday as the city mourns after a massive Russian missile and drone attack that killed at least 28 people and injured over 150. The attack marks the deadliest strike on the Ukrainian capital this year, flattening part of an apartment block and destroying a children's park, leaving rubbles behind. Locals gather at the site, laying flowers and paying respects to victims.
It is a tragedy for me because I was born here, I live here. It shocks me, especially when it happens near your home. You just can't ignore this. I came here to honor the killed because these people could have lived.
President Zelensky reports that Russia launched 440 drones and 32 missiles during the assault, hitting around 27 locations across Kyiv. Ukrainian officials said homes, schools, and critical infrastructure were damaged. Rescue teams continue to recover bodies as sirens and explosions echo through the city. Among the dead is a 62-year-old US citizen, confirmed by Kyiv's mayor and the US State Department. Emergency crews keep working amid ongoing threats, with attacks also striking other cities like Odessa, where 2 people have died. President Zelensky calls the strikes pure terrorism, accusing Russian President Vladimir Putin of launching them because he can afford to continue this war. As Kyiv grieves, residents come together to honor the victims, a powerful reminder of the human cost of this relentless conflict.
G7 leaders gathered in Canada reaffirmed support for Kyiv as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky urged more military aid and tougher sanctions on Russia. His appeal came amid signs of division, with the US President Donald Trump leaving the summit early.
At the second day of the G7 summit in Canada, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a direct plea for greater support. Standing alongside Zelensky, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney pledged billions of Canadian dollars in new military aid to Kyiv and announced a new package of sanctions against Russia.
With our international partners, we're launching a major new package of sanctions on individuals, on companies, on vessels, the Shadow Fleet, to exert maximum pressure on Russia. We're also sending over $2 billion in funding for drones, ammunition, armored vehicles to help Ukrainians defend their territory, as well as a $2.3 billion loan to help rebuild the infrastructure in that country. And take a moment to reiterate our condolences given the barbarism witnessed overnight in Kyiv caused by Russia.
A Canadian official initially said Ottawa had dropped plans for the G7 to issue a strong statement on the war in Ukraine after resistance from the United States. Zelensky used the moment to thank allies for new aid and repeated Ukraine's readiness to talk peace, but only if Russia feels the pressure.
It's a big tragedy for us, and we need support from our allies, and I'm here, and thank you for the military package. It's important for our soldiers to be strong at the battlefield, to stay strong until Russia will be ready for the peace negotiations. We are ready for the peace negotiations, unconditional ceasefire.
Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Tuesday referred to the G7 as rather useless after Russia was kicked out of the G8 in 2014. With conflict ongoing, Zelensky's visit underscored the stakes and the challenge of keeping allies aligned, echoed in the early departure of US President Donald Trump.
Australia has announced the start of negotiations of a new security and defense partnership with the European Union. The move was revealed on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada, where they also spoke about a possible free trade agreement.
Australia is set to begin formal talks on a new defence and security partnership with the European Union. It's after Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada. They discussed the EU proposal for a defence partnership, which Australian officials said did not have military deployment obligations. EU officials have clarified that the arrangement would not constitute a military alliance, similar to existing partnerships with Japan and South Korea.
I'm pleased to announce today that we will commence negotiations on a security and defence partnership with the European Union. We see this as an important framework for our current and future cooperation in areas like defence industry, cyber and counter-terrorism.
Albanese also voiced optimism over a long-stalled free trade agreement with the bloc, saying he's hopeful of a symbolically important trade deal.
Importantly, both of us emphasise that at this time it's the substance is what's important, but at this time it's also symbolically important to see an outcome of an expansion of trade.
Albanese's remarks came as Canadian Prime Minister and G7 host Mark Carney opened the now concluded summit with a warning that the world was at a turning point. With trade and defence both on the table, Australia's diplomatic push in Kananakis underscores the importance of its role it can play in an ever-changing world.
The United Nations Trade and Development Agency is planning to cut around 70 positions as part of its 2026 budget proposal. The decision comes during a period of increased demand for the agency's support in global trade, investment, and technology issues.
UNCTAD, the UN's key body for trade and development, is set to lose around 70 staff positions in its upcoming 2026 budget, out of a total workforce of roughly 500. The move comes amid sweeping cost-cutting reforms across the UN system, driven by a decline in global donor funding and ongoing liquidity problems.
This is painful. There's no way to disguise this. For UNCTAD to cut the number of posts that we are cutting, that are have to be close to between 70 and 80, yes? We haven't got that number of posts ever in one budget. And so it really will constrain the organization and the things that we can do.
The cuts come at a time when more countries are requesting UNCTAD support and analysis in areas such as trade, tariffs, digital development and debt, while the agency is reducing its capacity.
From their debt pressure. And probably what worries me the most is the possibility to respond to countries in their needs fast enough. Right now, we have this paradox that the demand for our services in trade, investment, finance, debt, technology, digital, that is growing because these are the things that the countries are demanding. And on the other hand, our resources are going down.
UNCTAD isn't alone. The UN Secretariat is planning to slash its $3.7 billion budget by 20%, and agencies were recently given a deadline to submit proposals for reductions. Geneva's Human Rights Office may even vacate its historic headquarters at Palais Wilson to save costs. The final decision on UNCTAD's budget will be made in September by member states and the UN Secretariat. But for now, its future capacity to support developing economies remains uncertain as global challenges keep growing.
China and Russia are closing in on a major energy deal that could reshape global gas flows. Through the proposed Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, 50 billion cubic meters of Russian gas may soon head to China annually. Our Manur Magdum has the details in Beijing.
China and Russia are expected to reach a major gas deal by the end of 2025 through the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, which would send 50 billion cubic meters of gas to China each year. The talks are ongoing with pricing and payment methods still under negotiations. A Russian advisor has confirmed that the process is active and both sides hope to reach an agreement pretty soon. The rising tensions in the Middle East, especially between Iran and Israel, has pushed China to secure more stable energy sources. This has added urgency to the pipeline talks as China seeks to reduce reliance on oil and gas from unstable regions. Russian President Putin is set to visit China in September, with talks of energy cooperation expected to be a top priority. If completed, the pipeline project would help Russia shift its exports from Europe and boost China's energy security. China is pushing for lower prices and flexible supply terms. This project would mark a deeper energy and political partnership between Beijing and Moscow. The 2,800-kilometer pipeline is intended to take gas from fields in western Siberia and send it to China. The implementation of the pipeline construction project was not very smooth. The project was halted back in 2009 due to disagreements over natural gas prices and a competition among sources in Chinese markets. However, the news of China and Russia being close to an agreement indicate that both sides remain interested in the completion of the project. Manu Mathum, AnewZ, Beijing.
The war in Sudan has raged for more than 2 years, turning thriving cities into ghost towns and pushing millions to the edge of survival. As famine and deadly diseases spread, the humanitarian crisis deepens by the day. AnewZ journalists risked their lives to reach the heart of the conflict, gaining rare access to regions few dare to enter.
The war in Sudan has raged for over 2 years, turning thriving cities into ghost towns and pushing millions to the edge of survival. As famine spreads and deadly diseases like cholera take hold, the humanitarian crisis deepens by the day. AnewZ journalists risk their lives to reach the heart of the conflict, gaining rare access to regions few dare to enter. Frontline Sudan Fight for Survival is an AnewZ original documentary filmed on the ground in the ruins of Khartoum, Omdurman and beyond. For more than 2 years, Sudan has been gripped by a brutal conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces. Entire cities have been destroyed, families torn apart, and millions displaced. But behind the numbers are real stories of survival, loss, and unimaginable resilience.
We are in Sudan, the country where the war has been going for almost 2 years. Entire cities have been emptied, millions forced to flee, and basic life, food, water, medicine has collapsed. This is the world's worst humanitarian crisis today.
In a rare and risky journey, the AnewZ team gained exclusive access to frontline abandoned just days earlier. The journalists walked through neighborhoods reduced to rubble, enter homes still bearing the scars of war. They spoke with survivors who lived through hunger, shelling, and the terror of militias.
Switching here was too hard to look people around you injured and killed and lost some of part of their body. It's too hard to look at blood and flesh.
They are my family and we suffer from water, food. There are no peace.
In Salha, southern Omdurman, AnewZ became the first and still the only journalists to document what was left behind. Bodies lay in the streets, A mass grave hidden behind the wall revealed hundreds of victims. Many showed signs of torture, starvation and execution.
This war is very, very dangerous for the region, not only for Sudan, because as you can see, there is a lot of drones involved now, coming from overseas, attacking electricity power supply, water supply. And this also can give a signal that the war is not really for implementing democracy and freedom, and it was really planned to destroy the country.
The United Nations has warned that 57% of Sudan's population, more than 25 million people, are now facing high levels of acute food insecurity. As the war drags on, farms have been destroyed, supply routes cut off, and markets left empty. At the same time, a deadly cholera outbreak is sweeping across the country. As of June 13, the World Health Organization reported 1,854 deaths in 13 states, with thousands of new cases emerging in recent weeks. In areas like Khartoum, entire families are falling ill, hundreds of cases and dozens of deaths reported in a single day.
We suffer from medicine, education, disease. Most of my neighbors, they are come out, and we live alone.
People can drink water without boiling it, just drink it. Drink it as there are some biotics in it. There are a lot of bad things, in the water. It's not clean, it's not clear, it's not pure. Also the chlor, there is no chlor within the water. So that disease happened. A lot of people dead here.
It took us 15 hours to come from Port Sudan to Khartoum. No flights, no functional airport, just a long road. This city recently declared fully liberated after months of brutal war. To report from here, we have to secure special permissions. Military checkpoints are everywhere. Khartoum recently declared fully liberated after brutal months of war. Now lies in ruins. Electricity is scarce. Clean water almost non-existent, and aid barely trickles through shattered infrastructure. For those who remain, every day is a fight to survive, amid the debris of a city that once stood tall.
They weren't busy with the democracy, as they were saying. It was just a big robbery. It was armed robbery, nothing much or nothing more.
In an inclusive interview, Sudan's Minister of Culture and Information revealed crucial details about the involvement of foreign powers in the ongoing conflict. The minister confirmed that the Rapid Support Forces were part of the government before the war began, and now they are heavily armed with weapons from various Western countries.
We captured a lot of weapons from big countries like USA now. This headline coming up in this last 24 hours. There is a lot of involvement for the Americans' weapons in the hands of the RSF, which is help them a lot to commit a lot of atrocities, big atrocities, genocide, displacing people. All this happened with Western countries' weapons, which is very dangerous.
Recently, French manufactured military technology exported in defiance of international law to Sudan have been found in the hands of the Rapid Support Forces. It is a clear violation of the United Nations arms embargo on Darfur.
There's one of us. He's killed not far away from the hospital.
He was killed?
Yes. When there are rockets, they are shelling outside of the hospital, maybe 20 meters from the hospital. There are a guardian there. They drink coffee. Their shelling happened. He was injured in his body in so dangerous place, and he died maybe after 10 minutes. His name is Sadiq Haider. He's the last one we lost him.
In Port Sudan, once considered a refuge, AnewZ crew witnessed the moment a drone targeted the city yet again, but this time it met a strong response. Right now the city is in complete darkness because the electricity has been turned off. In the sky above, glowing drones fly quietly, their lights shining like small stars.
They took us by surprise on the first day on 4th of May, But now we are very well prepared with anti-drones capabilities. But Port Sudan is a safe city, as you can see now.
What was uncovered paints a chilling picture of war crimes, hunger, disease, and silence. But it also reveals the unbreakable spirit of those who continue to fight, not with weapons, but with their will to survive and speak out.
الحاجة اللي حصلت دي تبقى تجربة وتبقى لنا عتب إنه نمشي لقدام، نصلح الحاجات السيئة اللي كانت ونمشي لقدام عشان شنو؟ Sudan will be better. Okay. Inshallah.
Frontline Sudan Fight for Survival is not just a documentary. It's a call to remember what the world too often chooses to forget. Now streaming on all social media platforms of AnewZ.
Azerbaijan marked the National Human Rights Day with a major international symposium in Baku. The event brought together global experts and officials to examine the role of national institutions in safeguarding rights, especially in post-conflict and vulnerable settings.
Azerbaijan marks June 18 as National Human Rights Day. An international symposium is being held in Baku, focusing on the role of ombudsmen in strengthening national institutions in the field of human rights protection. The event brings together experts to discuss enhancing human rights frameworks.
Hosted at the initiative of Azerbaijan's Human Rights Commissioner, the symposium welcomed ombudspersons, lawmakers, and human rights experts from over 15 countries. The gathering explored the role of national institutions in upholding rights in post-conflict settings and supporting vulnerable groups. Justice Minister Farid Ahmedov conveyed President Ilham Aliyev's message, highlighting Azerbaijan's dedication to the rule of law. Panel discussions addressed the best practices in refugee protection, ensuring equal rights, and adapting national legislation to modern challenges. International collaboration was a central theme throughout the event.
Türkiye İnsan Hakları ve Eşitlik Kurumu olarak birlikte işbirliği protokolümüz çerçevesinde
As the Human Rights and Equality Institution of Turkey, we have enjoyed a strong partnership with the Ombudsman of Azerbaijan under our cooperation protocol. Together, we have successfully carried out numerous joint initiatives. One of our most important collaborations was the publication of a thematic report in 2021 on human rights violations in Karabakh. This report was shared not only with our Azerbaijani counterparts, but also with the international community. It served to highlight the human rights situation in the region on a global level.
This is very important that the human rights be observed and their enforcement is ensured any and everywhere in the world, and bringing together ombudsmen and the commissioners of human rights here in Azerbaijan. This is a great step forward, and I believe in a modern world time where there are a lot of challenges, the humanity, they feel a lot of challenges, and there are oppressed people in every community. Now, to have a resolve together, think about them together and suggest ways and means to each other.
As part of the symposium, Azerbaijan's ombudsman Sabina Aliyeva and Zoran Pashalich, the protector of citizens of Serbia, signed a memorandum of understanding. The agreement aims to boost institutional cooperation, share experiences, and promote joint awareness initiatives in the field of human rights protection. The symposium concluded with the adoption of a joint declaration reaffirming global solidarity in the defense and advancement of human rights.
At an event at the UN marking the International Day for Countering Hate Speech, Pakistan called on the international community to take urgent action. For more on Islamabad's appeal, we go to Kumrat and our Tamim Bahis.
In a firm call to the global community, Pakistan has urged immediate international action to tackle the growing threat of hate speech, disinformation, and violent extremism. The warning came during a high-level UN event marking the International Day for Countering Hate Speech. Speaking at the event in New York, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Asim Iftikhar Ahmed, stressed the urgent need for a united global response. He warned that hateful narratives are tearing societies apart and jeopardizing global peace and stability. Ambassador Ahmed highlighted the alarming rise of intolerance, often fueled by disinformation and digital propaganda. He noted that minorities and vulnerable groups are frequently the primary victims of this rising tide of hate. He called on the international community to uphold human dignity, protect pluralism, and confront intolerance in all its forms. Pakistan's message aligns with growing global concerns over the impact of hate-driven content, both online and offline. The call for a collective response adds weight to international efforts already underway to address these challenges. Here in Kumrat Valley, a remote region home to minority communities, the message of safeguarding diversity feels especially relevant. Pakistan's appeal at the UN is a timely reminder that in an increasingly polarized world, unity and respect for diversity remain essential for peace. Tamim Bahis reporting for AnewZ in Kumrat, Pakistan.
Speakers of Georgia's and Turkish parliaments met in Ankara for talks on further developing bilateral and regional cooperation.
Georgia and Turkey continue to expand their economic ties and political engagement. The Speaker of the Parliament of Georgia, Shalva Papuashvili, met with the Speaker of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, Numan Kurtulmuş, in Ankara on Tuesday. During the meeting, both sides noted significant progress in bilateral and multilateral cooperation between both countries. They say the progress is reflected in growing economic ties and expanding political engagement. The speakers emphasized the steady pace of high-level visits between the two countries as a key driver of this positive momentum. Speaker Papuashvili expressed his appreciation to Turkey for its unwavering support for Georgia's territorial integrity. The two sides discussed the encouraging state of interparliamentary relations, reaffirming their determination to further strengthen their relationship, highlighting the essential role parliamentary friendship groups play in bringing the nations closer. Attention also turned to trilateral parliamentary cooperation, with both speakers confirming that preparations are underway for a meeting involving the parliaments of Georgia, Azerbaijan and Turkey. Regional and global developments were on the agenda as well, with both sides pledging continued efforts to promote peace and stability in the region. Finally, the meeting addressed major regional and strategic projects. The two speakers reaffirmed their readiness to enhance energy and transport connectivity, focusing on unlocking the full potential of the Middle Corridor, an increasingly vital route for trade and economic integration across the region.
Chinese President Xi Jinping called for the acceleration of the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway construction at a meeting with Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov in Astana during the China Central Asia Summit. Our Fariza Kalimurzina has the details.
President Xi Jinping urged speeding up the construction of the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway during his meeting with Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov on the sidelines of the China Central Asia Summit in Astana. She highlighted the strong potential of China-Kyrgyz cooperation and proposed expanding trade, investment and joint projects in emerging sectors. The railway set to connect China with Central Asia, Europe and the Middle East officially began construction in December 2024. The route spans 450 kilometers. Early estimates suggest the railway could transport between 7 and 15 million tons of cargo annually. Work on key sections such as bridges and tunnels started in April this year. A joint company was formed to oversee the project, with China holding a 51% stake and Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan each owning 24.5%. The construction is expected to take around 6 years. And currently, the only transport corridor from China to Europe and the Middle East runs through Kazakhstan via the Kyrgyz border crossing. The new route through Kyrgyzstan is 300 kilometers shorter, potentially cutting transport time by up to 5 days. Russia's position was previously seen as a challenge for the project. However, experts say Moscow's ability to block such initiatives is limited, partly due to its growing dependence on China amid the consequences of the war in Ukraine. This has given Beijing more freedom to reshape trade flows in Central Asia. However, considering the scale and complexity of the project, particularly the 260-kilometer mountainous section in Kyrgyzstan, quick progress is unlikely. Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Kyrgyzstan has unveiled projects worth about $200 million as the government pushes reforms to improve the business climate. Our Fikret Doluhanov reports from Bishkek.
Kyrgyzstan is stepping up efforts to attract foreign investment and position itself as a regional player in Central Asia's economic landscape. This week, the country presented a portfolio of 8 investment projects worth around $200 million at the Central Asia-China Industrial and Investment Cooperation Forum held in Astana, Kazakhstan. The focus was firmly on agriculture, with proposals ranging from modern poultry farms and food processing plants to seed production and livestock breeding. The Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Samat Naserdinov, reaffirmed Kyrgyzstan's openness to economic cooperation with both China and neighboring Central Asian countries, highlighting recent reforms to improve the business climate, including tax incentives and infrastructure support for priority sectors. Back home, right from the forum, President Sadir Japarov told Parliament that several draft laws are now under review, aiming to further reduce the tax burden for entrepreneurs. Among them is a proposal to create a special financial and investment zone in Tamchi on the northern shore of Issyk-Kul, which would operate under a distinct legal and economic regime. The president called on MPs to back the reforms, stating that attracting investment and growing the national economy is a shared responsibility. AnewZ, Fikret Doluhanov, Javid Aliyev, Kyrgyzstan.
The head of Armenia's National Security Service, Armen Abazyan, was dismissed by order of the country's Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan. Abazyan held the post since 2020 and was reappointed in January 2024. The reasons for his dismissal have not been publicly disclosed. Until a permanent replacement is appointed, Deputy Director Andranik Simonyan will take over the responsibilities of the NSS chief. The Space of Mogam 7th International Music Festival has opened in Baku, bringing together performers from more than 25 countries. Our Aliya Aziz brings more from the venue.
At the Haydar Aliyev Palace, the Space of Mogam 7th International Music Festival has officially begun here in Baku. Local Azerbaijani and international artists are showcasing their unique musical forms in front of the global audience. This concert hall is filled with excitement as people get to watch this week's performances. Organized by the Haydar Aliyev Foundation in collaboration with the Ministry of Culture, this festival marks a significant cultural moment dedicated to preserving and promoting one of Azerbaijan's most revered musical traditions, Mogam. Opening with a vibrant ceremony, the event welcomed artists, cultural figures, and international guests as the soulful echoes of Mogam filled the hall. This year's theme is Beati, an ancient and effective Mogam mode known for its spiritual depth and melancholic tone. Rooted in Azerbaijani music, it also echoes through Turkish, Central Asian, Arab, and Persian traditions, reflecting Mogam's cross-cultural reach. The festival has drawn over 50 performers from more than 25 countries. This international turnout underscores the growing recognition of Mogam as a global art form and provides a platform for musical dialogue and cultural exchange.
Baku has turned into a center of promotion of traditional music of Eastern people. It's what we musicologists call traditional model music. So it is improvised and based on definite tone scales, which are very different. But at the same time, we have now the landscape of what is going on in different countries around this type of music.
We are representing the Uyghur Mugam World Contest from East Turkestan of China. We are very excited to be here at this festival. We love the Mugam music. We also have Uyghur Mugam music. I think you will all enjoy our performance.
Azerbaycan Mugam'ı bu bölgede çok önemli, çok mühim.
Azerbaijani Mugam is very important and significant in this region because it carries the most valuable values of ancient culture from the past. As you know, the center of this music is Shusha. That's why the performers, vocal artists in the Mugam festival have very huge value in this geography. As a person who is doing a doctorate in this geography, I am a person who knows the value of the Mugam festival.
The program features solo performances, group collaborations, and panel discussions focusing on the future of traditional music in a modern world. Local artists share the stage with international musicians, creating a diverse and enriching experience for audiences of all backgrounds. The event will continue through June 22nd, offering daily concerts, forums across multiple venues in Baku. It promises to be a week-long celebration of heritage, harmony, and the evolving narrative of Mugam music. The space of Mugam continues to serve not only as a cultural showcase, but as a bridge connecting generations, regions, and musical traditions.
Well, that's all we had for you for now. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ.